And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about truth in advertising, fair trading, ASIC. We're going to talk about what the Trots are. We're going to talk about gerrymandering. And Brad reveals himself as a bit of a historian and a political scientist. A lie is where you willfully mislead somebody, knowing that what you're saying is factually incorrect.
I think I lie very well for my profession.
What does a liar look like? What does a psychopath look like?
I just want to say I hope there's a lot of criminals listening to this. We'll be picking up some good tips.
Bradford, we're back. How are you?
I'm all right. Yourself?
Yes, I'm busy week, doing a lot of TikTok videos, and everyone wants to know when they're being lied to and what signs to look out for.
Right, yeah. If only it was not so prevalent. It's everywhere, isn't it? And that's something we'll be talking about today.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, just before we say, well, we're going to talk about something we have talked about before, but we're going
into more detail.
In more detail, when we're talking about truth in advertising, or maybe more like untruth in advertising, because the research we've been doing, I'm seeing some results.
I'm noticing all these notes here. You've been a very busy beaver, haven't you?
I have indeed. It's keeping me off the streets.
Before we go down that track, just a couple inquiries we've had. Now, number one, Neil Strangler, I think it is, asked the question, we spoke about this the last time we caught up, about the Trots. And he wants to know what the Trots are. And, of course, I guess there are a lot of listeners out there think it might have something to do with digestion issues.
Yes, as in getting the Trots. Well, in fact, I believe our producer thought it was something to do with horses and police horses.
And, he did say that.
And it's, pardon me, which I suppose in the context of, we were talking about protests, but actually I was referring to the Trotskyite, who were the Fourth International Socialists, who were aligned with Moscow when the Russians in the early 20th century had a coup and went over and became Soviet Russia. Mm-hmm. And Leon Trotsky, who was eventually murdered, Leon Trotsky was a branch of socialism. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about today, I don't want to get into trouble with them, but back in the day, they were militant. Mm. And well, we just knew them as the Trots because whenever they turned up to union meetings, they just wanted, back then, they just wanted to fight the police. And we didn't want to fight the police.
Because they have batons, horses, riot control, like we spoke about last time.
And law as well. They apparently you're not allowed to hit them. Found it.
I'm going to start calling you Mr. Wikipedia. You're a wealth of information, you are.
Well, I sort of say to my stand-up comedy students, I say to them, comedians should know a little about a lot, because that's really how you communicate with people.
Another inquiry we received is from Graham, and he wanted to know what gerrymandering was.
Isn't it interesting too that Graham doesn't have the internet, clearly. I don't know how he listened to this, because you just look up gerrymandering. Maybe he looked up, didn't know how it's spelled, Gerrymander. Gerrymander, according to the notes in front of me, refers to the practice of manipulating an electoral district and boundaries to give. I sound like Pauline Hanson here. I've just completely lost the ability to speak properly.
Please explain.
Gerrymander. Sorry, I have to have that kind of
take a breath,
seething outrage underneath it all. Gerrymander refers to the practice of manipulating electoral district boundaries to give one political party or group an unfair advantage. It involves drawing maps to favour specific candidates. And so that's the boundaries get redrawn every now and then, and that's how we get safe in Australia. We get safe Labor streets, and we get Labor seats, and we get safe Liberal National Party seats. That's what a gerrymander is, and it's played by both sides, the left and the right, and it goes on to this very day. It's been around. It was named after it says here, coined in 1812 after Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry signed a bill creating a partisan district shaped like a salamander. That's got to be the most precise origin I've heard. And why didn't they call it an Elbridge-mander rather than a gerrymander? But anyway,
good point.
Elbridge is that's not two first names, that's two second names. Weird.
All right, so thank you, Neil and Graham, for those, and anyone else listening out there. If you have any questions of the great Brad when it comes to political, geopolitical stuff, he's the man. He's your man. But let's move on to truth in advertising.
Okay, well, so yeah, it's according to what I've been looking into, there's quite what would you call quite clearly drawn rules and regulations and laws, in fact, in Australia about what you can and can't say when you're advertising.
But that doesn't stop large companies from breaching or pushing it to the edge and over the edge, does it?
No, and it's to me it was like so black and white. It says here these rules apply across common ad formats. Like we're talking about, say, advertising, like websites and online stores, social media posts and influencer promotions. We'll come back to influencers, catalogues, flyers, TV and radio and print ads, product packaging. We'll come back to that, and online reviews and testimonials. Now, I couldn't think of an area where I haven't seen absolutely a plethora of people disobeying those rules.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, a lot of these websites, and it comes down to what they call social proof. People make them up. As we've seen just recently, the Victorian government had all these bots sign up. I think it was like 50,000 people, started following the Labor government. And of course, it comes back to being deceptive. I mean, we have laws. We have fair trading laws. We have ASIC. For those international listeners, it's Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and they're the people who are meant to enforce and govern these things. But if somebody makes a factually incorrect and misleading and a deliberately and intentionally misleading statement in an effort to engage sales, well, they have to wear the consequences. But what we're seeing is if you or I did some of these things, they'd hunt us down. But what we're seeing is some of the large corporations, Westpac, Coles, Woolworths, colluding and engaging in all these practices. And if it was you and I, we'd, for doing those type of things, we'd really get into trouble. But they're limited because a lot of their penalties are financial. Well,
okay, and there's also the everyman test, I suppose, or
pub test.
Pub test.
And explain what the pub test is for our international listeners.
Well, you explain what it is. I've done all the others.
Okay, well, you're tired, are you, Brett?
I am. I'm exhausted.
So it's we have this thing here in Australia, whereas you're sitting there with a group of people at the pub having a drink, and if something is spoken about and it sounds like it's not believable or fair, or it's something that is unreasonable, then we would question it. But it seems to be lost on some of these big corporates, and it's a morality thing, isn't it? It's like if you hear something and you think, well, that doesn't sound right. Somebody's being ripped off. That's not fair. That's what we call the pub test.
Yeah, and two things about the pub test. One is I think that after about 3 hours in the pub, it becomes ridiculous.
Change.
It's really anything goes. But
the early stages.
I'd say that there's certain. It's the Emperor's new clothes, right? You remember the parable of the Emperor's new clothes, that he paid all this money to get these fine clothes made, and he ended up walking naked through the streets, but nobody was game to say, "Oh, you don't look fantastic," until some child said, "You're naked." Anyway, just that way, I've just stopped us getting somebody ringing in. Wanting to know what the Emperor's new clothes was. So the thing is, I've been watching weight loss ads, and if you look at me, you know why, because I want to do something about it. I've been wanting to do something for over 20 years, and I see people consistently, and I'm not going to name anybody.
Name them.
I'm not naming anybody, but I've seen people consistently go on TV and advertise for weight loss and not lose any weight. And I don't know. This is one of the first routines I wrote when I was doing stand-up comedy. Was I said I disbelieve these weight loss people because I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I joined Gloria Marshall. I don't know if they're around anymore.
I thought they were coffee people.
No, Gloria Marshall.
Was that a weight loss thing?
Yeah.
Jean Marshalls. I mean, anyway, go on, keep going.
Gloria Jeans, you're thinking.
Gloria Jeans, yes.
Yeah, I really just refer to your. I think refer to your notebook, detective. So we had Gloria Marshall. I said I joined Gloria Marshall. I thought this is good, but it's not fast enough. So I joined Light and Easy as well. I joined Nutrisystem Diet Plan. I joined Weight Watchers. I was eating 36 of those little packet meals a day. I put on 40 kilos in the first month. This is bullshit.
I think you need to read the instructions.
Yeah, but I've seen that, and for some reason, nothing's ever said. You know, we just see some celebrity who didn't lose any weight,
or they've lost it and put it back on.
Yeah, well, I would like maybe forgive that, right? Because I've done that.
I've got a bit of a story, a weight loss story, and obviously I won't mention names because I know this person. And she went to, I think it was Weight Watchers. Are they still around, Weight Watchers? Are they?
Yeah.
Anyway, according to their website, you follow a strict calorie control diet, and I don't know what the allowances are for men or women, but size. You have a certain. You might know the caloric intake, which is what is acceptable. But under that caloric intake, you start losing weight.
Yeah.
Over it, you gain it.
Yeah.
And she was putting on weight.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling me a story that she sort of complained to one of the area managers or something that she wasn't losing, and she was in fact gaining weight. And the manager said, "Well, this is scientifically proven that if you follow this, you will lose weight." And I mean, she was a big lady, and she then eventually had a lap band surgery. Now, I don't know if you know what that is, but basically they tie your stomach up so you feel full quicker.
Yeah. And
she had that, and she lost a little bit of weight, then she started putting it on again. And she was telling me that she started putting Tim Tams in milk and making chocolate milkshakes. And so still the caloric intake, the sugar was all there, and she was actually losing weight. So, it was a behavioural thing. You know, people eat for different reasons, comfort, hate their work, hate their boss or whatever. So I think you've got to look at the behaviour, and that's my thing. I've always been interested in the behaviour. Do
you know, I really thought what you were going to say was that she was actually doing the calorie intake for men. You know, and I thought she might have had an androgynous name, like, because she could have been a Kim, and she's going, why am I putting on weight? Because you're a girl. Oh, okay. Now I understand.
Just on that, just very quickly, I'm pretty much the same weight that I was when I joined the police academy. And my weight, I'm 6'2", 187 centimetres, around about between 88 and 90 kilograms. It's been like that for years and years. And
it's a weapon.
A very fine-tuned weapon. Anyway, so what had happened was I was reading a story once, and they talk about fasting, and I didn't realise it, but my whole life, I don't eat breakfast. Right? I'm always running late. I have a coffee on the run, all that type of thing. And usually, about 1 o'clock, I'm getting a little bit hungry. I thought, I'll eat something. So there's a lot of credible research now that shows that, basically being careful when you eat, your body starts, maintains that weight or in fact loses it. So I've never ever had a struggle with weight, yet my brother, who's the same height, is around about, he'll kill me for saying this, so I hope he's not listening, but I don't know, he'd be 150, 160 kilos.
Wow.
So basically, he's lost a bit of weight since then, but he was a heart attack waiting for a place to happen. But the point is that, for him it was behaviour.
Yeah.
And one of the things you may not know, I hypnotised this lady once. She wanted to lose weight. And we were talking about different ways of losing weight. And it turned out that she was an unhappy marriage and all sorts of stuff. And I think the weight is the byproduct of the behaviour.
Yeah, look, I agree. Look,
not in all cases, but sometimes people have medical issues, of course. But
we did get a little bit away from deceit there, although I think that warnings are important. I stopped smoking. There's warnings on the packet. I don't gamble. There's warnings on the packet.
But did those warnings on that cigarette packet really stop you from smoking?
I'm not sure, but I just want to make the point. There's no warning on the fish and chip shop. When I walk up there, it doesn't say you could end up, and there's a picture of me. Anyway.
It's a little bit like childhood, like having children. You buy a brand new car, you get a manual that's like that thick. You get a child, nothing.
No, you don't even get a warning.
No.
What I wanted to ask you though was, like, this is all well and good. There's all this information saying, well, this is illegal and these people have been prosecuted and so on. But there's a division of labour here in terms of this is crime, but it's not investigated by the police, is it?
No.
Okay, so do you know much about the investigations into this, like who these investigators are? Are they ex-job or? So
let's talk about fair trading or ASIC, the corporate investigators or enforcers, if you like. Mainly you'll find police take investigative responsibility for crimes committed against people and property.
Right.
And you could argue that some of these big companies engaging in fraud, because under the Crimes Act, there's obtained property by deception and obtained financial advantage by deception. Getting back to what I said, if you or I commit those, we can actually have a conviction, if we're convicted, against us, and suffer penalty depending on the size of the deception. Yet it seems some of these bigger companies engage in those type of behaviours and get away scot-free, or just get a slap on their wrist and don't do it again, and $500,000 fine, which to some of these big corporates are nothing.
Yep.
But getting back to your question, usually you'll find some of the investigators, ASIC in particular, will have their investigators and they'll look for breaches in corporate crimes. So, trading whilst insolvent, any claims that relate to, bad governance or no governance of companies and all that type of thing. Whereas fair trading, now each state here in Australia has their own, government department that's responsible for checking. We call it truth in advertising, but they're not. Usually, there might be some ex-police investigators, but they are not investigated by the police at all.
Okay, so
unless there's any criminal impropriety.
That leads me to my next question, which is about the nature of investigations, because are they just following like a very linear path? Whereas, how would the police say it was it did spill over and became a crime, pursuant or subsequent to the Crimes Act? Mm-hmm. How would you investigate that?
Well, firstly, it's got to be reported.
Okay.
So once it's reported, then police can act on it. So once again, depends on what it is. So if it's a large-scale fraud, then obviously you would be looking for victims, and sometimes victims come forward and report it. Sometimes you get whistleblowers reporting it, or sometimes you might even come across it during a search, executing search warrants, and that. And then all of a sudden you start digging deeper and leads back to frauds or thefts or whatever. But at the end of the day, insofar as how you investigate it, once it's reported, then you would take statements from all the victims involved, and then once that's done, you would then interview. Of course, you look for other substantive evidence, forensic, scientific, medical, operative, or whatever it may be, and then you would put together a brief of evidence, and that brief of evidence would then be presented to, South Australia Police, it would be presented to their prosecutors. In other states, it would be to the officer in charge of the area or division. Yeah. Then they would look through the brief, see if they thought it had sufficient evidence to substantiate a conviction. And if so, then they would give you the authority to proceed. And in that case, depending on if they're bailed or whatever, or it would be a summons in that case. So then they would be subpoenaed to attend court and answer the charges.
So these investigators in, say, the corporate world would they come from the police?
In some cases, yeah.
Right.
I've trained, some, government bodies, and they've had, ex-police investigators. But, I mean, it consists of many people who investigate, not just necessarily ex-police.
So what I'm getting at is investigation wherever you go.
Well, there are different standards of investigation.
Okay. That's interesting.
I think be careful what I say here, but what I have found is particular government departments, they call themselves investigators, and they lack the investigative know-how, knowledge, or criteria. I mean, look, in a lot of police interviews, how it works is we have every offence has what we call a point of proof. It's called the points of proof. So I'll give you a great example. Say theft. Now let's see if I can remember it. Identity. Dishonestly appropriate property belonging to another with intent to permanently deprive. That's what the police have to prove and negate any defences. So the questions will cover each one of those points of proof. So there is a standard, legislative standard that investigators have to follow, the rules of evidence and all that type of thing, properly cautioned, rah-de-rah-de-rah. And then, and of course, people can make no comments in interviews, which happen quite regularly. But at the end of the day, you still have to collect evidence because as an informant, if I'm charging somebody, I want to make sure my case is watertight. I want to make sure that I've got all the evidence. And in some of these bigger crimes, you're looking for everything from gunshot residue, biological trace evidence, fingerprints, DNA, blood, witnesses, CCTV footage, tolls, entries and whatnot for movement, listening devices, telephone intercepts. So together, holistically, we're looking for as much evidence as possible that we think it would warrant a prosecution. But we just collect the evidence and we put the case together, the brief of evidence, and then it's taken out of our hands and then it goes to the prosecutors or, depending on the crime, DPP, which is called the Director of Public Prosecutions, and then they have one of their lawyers prosecute for and on behalf of Victoria Police or whichever police department.
We'll just put a pin in that for a second. Can you tell me what a line of inquiry is then?
Oh, it could be many. It doesn't necessarily have to be one. Let me give you a great one.
Yeah.
You find footprints in mud at the scene of a crime. And you've got, say, the deceased inside the building. One of the lines of inquiries would be, let's see if we can find any fingerprints. May be potentially the offender. Let's look at those footprints. I remember when I was at the FBI, this was going back years ago, they actually had a shoe database. So what that meant is every single shoe that has been manufactured, they have a copy of the tread. And they could use that at matching crime scenes. So that's a line of inquiry. Let's just say you want to look for other witnesses or disprove alibis. That's another line of inquiry. So usually you find, let's take the homicide squad, for example, in any police department. Usually what will happen is you've established a crime has been committed. Then you'll go to the scene, you'll determine whether or not, and this is interesting, this part, but you've got to consider whether or not it's a suicide, a homicide, circumstances that may lead to a particular individual being involved. One of those lines of inquiry would be speaking to people, speaking to witnesses, checking CCTV footage at the front of houses. So there is not one line of inquiry. There can be sometimes several, depending on the complexity of the case.
Okay, so and just getting back to what we were saying about the difference, maybe in investigation, I suppose, is that you, and as an investigator, have to find out if it's been committed. Mm-hmm. Whereas I suppose if you're coming to the ACC or whoever, you go look what they've done and you've got the evidence of what they've done and you put that before them. Would that be right?
Yeah. So let me give an example by a case I was involved in. I was a detective at Flemington and got called to a body. I got there. There were 3 people sitting in the lounge room. And I spoke to the 3 people. I spoke to the uniform guys first. And they told me the deceased is in the bedroom. And of course, you've got to be mindful that, you don't want to contaminate a crime scene because at that stage, are they natural causes? Is there violence or force, poisoning? You don't know because sometimes you may have a body and we have to wait for an autopsy. They'll do pathology tests on blood poisons and stuff, toxicology. There's that's a different. That's forensic medicine, of course. So those pathologists are looking for cause of death, a potential time of death, looking for, I remember working in one particular case, I had to watch an autopsy, and I remember when they cut open the person's stomach, you could see undigested food, and they can tell a lot just from that. So I think one of the things we should do on this podcast is get some of these specialists in down the track. But anyway.
So that undigested food, was it like Gloria Marshall and Jenny?
That stuff will kill you. So there will be, several lines of inquiry, but at the end of the day, you will look for any evidence. And this is, I had this conversation the other day. I can go to a crime scene. I can tell you in minutes whether it's organised, disorganised, whether the offender spent time with the victim, post-mortem, the body's been moved, all that type of thing. And this was one of those cases. So anyway, the uniform guys told me what happened, 3 guys sitting there, and I said, okay, what's the story? And they said, we had a bit of a party and we walked out and, Ted, that's not his real name, Ted, just walked inside the room and we never saw him, and the next morning he was dead. So I went into the, not a very credible or believable story, by the way. Anyway, I walked in and I was in there for, about 5 minutes just looking, and then I walked out and I looked at them, the 3 of them, and I said, who moved him? That's the first thing. And they were all perplexed. They go, how do you know he was moved? I said, one of you 3 have moved him, and I want to know who, and I want to know now. Anyway, one guy puts his hand up. He goes, how did you know I moved him? I said, well, I know about you, but when I go to bed, I take my shoes off. So sometimes there's evidence that we need to look at and look and examine thoroughly.
Yeah, I thought there might have been a note that said, none of these guys killed me.
I wish it were that easy.
All right. So, look, again, we have barely scratched the surface here. I just wanted to talk quickly about banks. I know the banks have been in trouble, and they weren't the first to come up. When I looked into this online, I have a problem with banks because I feel like I was sick and I was in hospital for 2 weeks, but I did not operate my bank account for a month. Right, and at the end of the month, I got a fee for operating my bank account, and when I disputed it with the bank, basically the operating my bank account was them raising the fee for me operating my bank account.
That you weren't.
So that's a lovely little thing they've got going. Or
nice little scam. I'd like to get on that one.
It's I wonder if the mafia knows about it. But my problem with banks is that they have misrepresented. Maybe we'll get to that in the future.
It's such a wide-ranging subject. I mean, we can certainly come back and visit.
Well, yeah. And look, I think the telling thing for me is that this is crime. This is, and yet it's not being addressed by the Crimes Act, is it?
It comes down to whether or not there's a crime under or initiated or falls within the auspices of a particular act of legislation. Now, once again, there is a delineation between the Crimes Act and I'm talking here in Australia for overseas listeners, Corporations Act. So there are certain rules and laws you have to follow as a director of a company, but of course, it's a very grey area, isn't it? You usually see, the CEO and members of boards and whatnot pretty well protected because, and if you look at ASIC, I mean, you very rarely do you ever, even for occasionally for insider trading, do you see them do jail time. They get penalties in the form of monetary penalties, like a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So is that? I guess the question is is that an active deterrent? And how effective is it as a deterrent, especially when these companies turn over hundreds of millions? Totally.
Is it just like a business write-off? And look, one specific area, just before we wind up, that I found amusing was that there can even be problems with instructions. And I wondered how much, there's a website that basically records really badly translated instructions from one language to another. And the one I found was Chinese to Australian, because this can result in injury. Mm-hmm. Right? And it just a couple for people's enjoyment. This is Chinese to English. For your safety, do not put hand into machine while machine is rotating in happiness. Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Please close door gently, otherwise door will become angry and not function normally. And we've all had an angry door.
I've actually, there is an angry door at 101 Collins, I think it is from memory, that thing that runs around in circles, and you watch it chew people up, it gets very angry.
Yeah, well, see, and the problem is that it's revolving, so you don't get to read the warning. When battery is low, please charge in time or product may enter sleeping forever condition. Sleeping forever condition is a beautiful way of saying it's done. But my point is, like, this is amusing, endless source of amusement, but dangerous, and as I said, can result in injury. So I just wondered, what's your take on how liable is somebody for that?
Well, I mean, you'll find a lot of, what's the word, conditions of use in some of these apps and stuff like that. And it's all care, no responsibility type contract where they go,
how does that
you
work?
use our product knowing that, unless, you get, people doing silly things, right? But if you look at these contracts, and I'm seeing now more and more contracts are getting longer and more ridiculous. And who reads them? Let's be realistic. Who reads these contracts that go for about 37 pages or something like that?
Nobody does, but my point is there's a lot of angry doors out there, and we need to know where they are, and we need to know that somebody is going to take responsibility for them.
Agreed.
All right. I guess... like I said,
geez, how quick did that go?
I know.
We hardly touched on what we wanted to.
We got through page 1, I think, of the 30 pages that I put. I see, I lied, but there was quite a few. We'll be back. And also, if this raises anything for you, first of all, check out ScamWatch. Just type ScamWatch into your computer. But if you have any questions for us, feel free.
Let us know. Anything about lying, anything that you think is interesting for other listeners, let us know. Get in contact.
All right, Steve. Again, until next week.
All the best.
Cheers. I just want to say I hope there's a lot of criminals listening to this. You'll be picking up some good tips.